Hello, and welcome to the Step Stories podcast. I'm your host, Robin Breuner, and I'm truly honored and excited to have a conversation today with my special guest. She wrote a book that I connected with so much, and it's become one of my favorite books. So, welcome, Genevieve Kingston. Hi.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to see you again.
I'm glad to see you again. And I have to say, I have to tell the story of the first time we met because it's so ridiculous, but it's kind of funny. Um, Gwen, I call her Gwen, but she's known as Genevieve, wrote a book called "Did I Ever Tell You?" and it's a memoir. And I read this book. It was recommended by Oprah Daily as one of the best memoirs of 2024, and New York Times. Editor, I think and she had wrote a modern love column called "She's Put Her Unspent Love in a Cardboard Box," and then your memoir came out of that. And so I read all this and I just fell in love with your book, and I related to it so much because it was so similar in some ways and different in others, but to my own life and story. And so I reached out to Genevieve and asked if I could just talk to her sometime. And she was so gracious. You were so gracious. And so we set a time to have a Zoom talk, and it was a rainy day in December, and I was heading up the hill to my house, and a dump truck stopped in front of me that was filled to the brim with debris. And all of a sudden, it lost its engine or something happened, and it backed up over my car, over my hood, about a foot from my windshield. And I was due to meet Genevieve in about 5 minutes, and I freaked out, and it was raining. And anyway, I ran up the hill. I called my husband and I got on I kept saying, "Do you mind? I just had a dump truck roll over my car. Do you mind if we push back an hour?" And you were so kind about it. Anyway, we did end up talking that day, and I'll
Oh
never
my
forget it.
gosh. Well, and I couldn't believe it because I was thinking, oh my gosh, this thing has happened. Like, surely we should, reschedule, take your time, get, recover. And you were like, no, it'll be fine. I'll be there in 20. And I thought, wow, not a lot ruffles this lady. You were ready to go.
Well, that's how important your book was to me. And I have to say one more thing about it. And we're going to talk about it a lot, but I just read something the other day on, I don't know, I think it was Instagram. It was one of those, "What book do you remember that made you cry?" And I was thinking to myself, I can't really think of something. I was thinking. And this morning I picked your book back up because it's been a year since I read it. And I read the beginning and I started crying. And I thought, this is the book that made me cry right from the beginning. I just felt it right in my heart. So, anyway, enough about all that. Before we dig into the book, let's talk about you and a little bit about what you've got going on in your life and who you are, and then we'll go into the rest. Can you tell
Yes,
us?
absolutely. I'm a Northern California girl. I grew up in a little city called Santa Rosa. It's about an hour north of San Francisco. It's sort of vineyards and dairy farms. Beautiful part
It's
of the
beautiful.
world. Yeah, and I actually grew up in the same town on the same street where my mom lived when she was a little girl, and we went to all the same schools, and so I have a deep connection to that place. And we'll sort of go into my childhood, I imagine, since that's partly why we're here. But I went to UC Berkeley for undergrad, although for a brief moment I was enrolled at Tufts, where you also went, and like you, I did not stick around. Nothing to do with Tufts, but
Yeah.
I just wasn't in the right place in my life to go away that far and to make that big transition, which I, discovered. But I did my undergrad at UC Berkeley, and then after I started a little theater company. I'm a writer, an actor, a playwright with some friends from UC Berkeley, and did that for a couple of years. And then I was finally ready to make that transition to the East Coast. And I went to Providence and got my MFA in acting at Brown. And now I live in New York with my husband and our dog. And we're both artists. He's an actor. I'm an actor, writer, playwright still. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
That's pretty exciting. Thank you for sharing that, and that was just another thing when I read your book because I live, just south of where you grew up, and so I felt that connection there and the connection to Tufts, everything else, so well, let's talk about your book. Here it is. I highly, highly recommend it. Did I ever tell you? And we will put a link in our show notes about it. It's just a beautiful book. And I would like to dig into it a little bit because we're here for step stories. But before we got to a step story, we had a family and we had a mother who was dying of cancer. So, can we talk about it a little bit and just how you were able to write this, and just maybe you could just outline the story for us.
Absolutely. So that's me and my mom on the cover there. And it's probably one of the last pictures that was taken of us before she got sick. She was diagnosed with cancer when I was 3, and she passed away when I was nearly 12. But during that time, she put together a box of gifts and letters for every one of my birthdays until I turned 30. And for things like getting my driver's license and graduating high school and college and getting engaged and getting married and having a baby. So she really poured herself into preparing me for her death. And, at the time that I started writing the book, I was 31. So I had just opened all of those birthday presents, and what was left in the box was engagement, marriage, and baby. And that really felt like a time, I wasn't sure whether or not those were things that would happen in my future, whether I wanted those things to happen. And so it really felt like a time to go back over all of those letters and this whole kind of
Mhm.
conversation that she and I had been having through her letters for 20 years and what she had taught me about herself and the kind of woman that she was. Because often the gifts would be something that she'd received when she was my age. So here's something I got when I was 16, and here's what I was doing and thinking about when I was 16. And I wonder if it's the same for you. And so
Hmm.
I'd been learning about her and her life that whole time. And it felt like time to, yeah, sort of re examine everything she taught me about the woman she was and the kind of woman that I wanted to be. So that
Well,
was where I
what
began. Yeah.
yeah, and what a gift. Having my mother die at the exact same age, basically. I was 1 year younger, 10, but I don't have any of that. In fact, I just digitized, a bunch of old family films and watched them, and what a gift that was to just get to see my mother and see myself as a little girl and, remember those things that are hard to remember. So I think that it must have been for your mother to put together each one of those things must have soothed her own soul as she was doing it, knowing you were gonna have that, right?
Yeah, I hope so. And it's something I hear so often is, "Oh my gosh, you're so lucky," to have this record of her and her life and this knowledge that she was thinking about you so much. And I absolutely agree. I feel so, so lucky to have had that. And I've such the older I get, the more I'm sort of in awe of her foresight and her courage in being able to put that together. We had, a really interesting childhood because we knew she was sick for so long. It really shaped
Mhm.
our family, and it's part of the reason I was eager to write the book was I haven't read a great many books about what it's like to grow up with a terminally ill parent, and I know that we're out there because I've been in the support groups, but it's such an particular experience. It colors your childhood so deeply, and so I was eager
Mhm.
to delve into that. One of the ways that our family coped with the shadow of her mortality and death was these incredibly, like, elaborate we sort of really dug into, to life and holidays and birthdays. My parents would throw these incredibly, like, elaborate birthday parties that the whole kinda extended family would get roped into helping with, and we'd have these big Thanksgiving celebrations, and it also sort of felt kinda magical at the time, but I'm also aware that it was a way of we never knew which Thanksgiving would be the last or which birthday party would be
Mhm.
the last one. Every year kinda felt like this might be it. And so it created an intensity to my childhood that I think was particular.
Well, one of the things for me reading your book was how your mom and dad handled it. Your mother was so straightforward with you from the beginning.
Yeah.
It's like she tried her best to demystify and to take away the scariness of her impending death. And that was very different than what I experienced, where it was nobody was talking about what was happening. And I don't know if people just didn't want to believe that's what was happening, but and your mom lived a pretty long time with this
Yeah.
illness, but I think it was unusual how she handled it, and so strong of her. Very, admirable, honestly, the way
I
she prepared
agree,
you.
and those conversations are incredibly hard, and, we did not make them easy. I have an older brother that 4 years older. The 2 of us, we really resisted having those conversations as children, each in our own way. I would try to distract everyone, and my brother would fall asleep, and because we didn't we sort of it was so difficult to really hold that space for what was really happening, but I'm
Mhm.
so incredibly grateful that she did because it did mean we were informed all the way. We did so much processing of our grief with her before her death, which was such an incredible gift. So I wouldn't have it any other way, but I understand why people avoid it or can't face it. It's hard. They're hard conversations to have.
It's
And one
really hard.
conversation, yeah, one conversation I remember, speaking of our topic here, was she really tried to prepare me for the fact that my father would probably remarry after she died. And she really encouraged me to keep an open mind and to say, of course this person will not be me. They will never replace me, but it will probably happen. There will probably be another woman in your father's life. And, you know, I don't want you to sort of close your heart to that possibility or feel like it's taking me away.
Wow, that's I'm just blown away by
Me too.
what a person she was, her humanity and her incredible depth of love for you, that she was able to just deal with all this and want you to have everything if she couldn't be there. And I know the other thing that you talk about a lot in your book that I was really impressed with were how many of your mother's friends and extended family really rallied around her and around you for your whole childhood and beyond, right?
Absolutely, yeah, because she was sick for so long, our house was always full of people, her friends really a core group of friends really stood by her, mostly women. They were in our house all the time, and they took an interest in me and took care of me and spent time with me when she couldn't because she was too busy or too ill. And our extended family showed up for us in extraordinary ways. And so our house was this sort of hub of activity. And so many people became part of this journey that we were all on dealing with my mother's health. And then it was quite striking when she died that suddenly our house was quiet, quieter than it had ever been, and it was just for a short time, it was just me and my brother and my father for a very quite a short time, a year or so, before my father met my who became my stepmother, and things changed once again.
Okay, so and I haven't reread the entire book in a little while. My memory was I so they so that's interesting. I thought all these friends and extended family really continued to stay around you, but it sounds like maybe they gave you some space and then once a stepmother came in, it changed the dynamic. Is that true?
Well, it's interesting. I think what happened, they very much stayed in my life. They are still in my life. So many of these people, and we forged these really strong, really wonderful relationships. And yeah, in a way, I feel like I have all of these surrogate mothers. I think what happened was uh, everything was centered on our home, our physical home. That building was the nexus of so much of this. And what happened after my mother passed was that shifted. It became
Hmm.
my father's house and the site of his, what would become his relationship and marriage. And so all of those connections kind of had to move outside of the house. So suddenly I would go and, meet someone for lunch or coffee or miniature golf or a slumber party. But there was this feeling that all of that, the thing that had held us together in that geographical location had gone. The reason for everyone being there, which was that my mom was there and couldn't easily leave, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
That
So,
makes
so
it
all of that
does.
care, it shifted out of the home and became this other support structure that I could go to and access and be nurtured by. But home became kind of a different, quiet, kind of sad place in a way.
Mm, mm. And I think that happens a lot
Mhm.
where everything's centered, and then when somebody passes, everything's centered, and then it becomes so quiet. And I remember that too. And well, one of the things I wanted to say about that is something I say a lot on this podcast. I like to talk about it because I like to put it out into the world is how important, though, friends and extended family can be, family, friends, and extended family, adults, for kids who have either experienced the loss of a parent or a divorce, whatever it is, or some other kind of abandonment, I suppose. I think that those people are incredibly important to the stability and the well being of those kids because they can come in and there's somebody to talk to. There's somebody that a child knows they can go to. It helps the child to feel less lonely. And so I always really encourage that for people who have these relationships to please come in and be a support to these kids because they really need it and it reflects on them when they grow up and they're they feel held. So I don't know what you think about that,
I
but
totally agree. I whenever I've had the privilege of talking to many folks now who are in the position of either they're they have children and they're looking at a very serious illness, or it's their partner is facing that illness and they're trying to figure out how to take care of their children in that context. And my number one piece of advice is always to strengthen their relationship with other trusted adults, to
Mhm.
really give them direct access to other grown-ups who and trust and who will love them and be there for them. And you know what? Even if no one in the family is sick, it's wonderful to give your kids that opportunity of those other
Yeah.
perspectives of that person
Mhm.
who you can go to when you just don't know how to talk to your parents about something. I think that nuclear families have become increasingly isolated in this modern era, and the more we can kind of lateralize outward and create bigger communities, I think it's just huge for kids. It's such a gift, and I have the great blessing of being I now have two godchildren, and the more I'm hoping for more, I have the honor of being in other young people's lives because I just know how vital it can be.
Are you? I feel bad. Like I'm not typically somebody who's pushy, so I have to be on a podcast. But do you want to have kids of your own? I know it's
Uh,
personal.
Yeah, no, no. My husband and I are not planning on having children. I
Mm.
never say never, so I'm not. I don't pretend to know for sure how I will feel about this tomorrow, but I that is how we felt up until now. So that's the plan. We are delighted and honored by the opportunity to be in the lives of the children of friends who we love. It's such a precious thing, and so that's how we get our kid fix.
Got it. All right. Well, let's go back and talk about your dad a little bit and your brother.
Mhm.
Um, so you were really close to your dad growing up, right? He
Yeah, he
was
was,
a fun guy, right?
yes, he was a fun guy. Yeah, he
Well,
was
let's
full
talk
of
about him.
mischief, and he was English, and all of his family was back in England, so we were really our mom's family was the family that we really grew up with and were centered in. He was like the events coordinator of our lives. He was always, like, setting up scavenger hunts and, adventures and making things fun, and I mean, he was just the perfect father for really young children, and was an amazing grandfather. Uh, and of course, this caused a lot of difficulty between him and my mom because she's, thought like, why am I the only grown up in the house and all he wants to do is play with the kids? And then when it's time for discipline or to set a boundary, I'm on my own, So yes, we thought he was just the most fun guy in the world.
Well, that must have also been a blessing for when your mom was sick, that you had such a heavy thing with that, and then you had this dad who was able to sort of bring the lightness, I would imagine.
Yeah, yeah, it was. I think that's right. And I think that the combination of their personalities was why we had all these spectacular, whimsical parties and things. The two of them together were really good at loving us and taking care of us and building this sort of amazing protective world for us to live in while our family was going through this hard thing. But it also took a big toll on my parents' marriage. And I mean, I think this
Mm,
relates to our conversation of step families. Is that I think at the heart of some of it is that my parents' marriage really wasn't very successful or very happy, as it turns out. They just weren't very well suited to each other, even though they were both had such good intentions and were good, honorable people who tried really hard. I do believe they would have separated if there had been time, if my mom hadn't gotten sick when we
mm,
were so young. But I think that once my mom was sick, my father, being who he was, which was again a person of great who valued loyalty and honor, he wouldn't have considered leaving once she was ill, which is, no small thing. It's hard to stick around through something so tumultuous, especially when the marriage is already fragile.
mm. Well, all right, so I'm glad he did for your
Yeah.
kid's sake and for her. So let's go on with your dad. So your mother passed,
Mhm.
and then what happened?
So then he enjoyed a period of being sort of the most eligible bachelor on the block kind of thing. He was this, so he had this charming English accent and had this sort of tragic widower backstory, and was kind of, I think I later realized that sort of all of the women of Santa Rosa were, wondering who he would marry next. And so he certainly wasn't like left to his own devices. People were, were interested. And he had a few sort of casual he dated a few people who I sort of met. One in particular I spent a little time with. But about a year, a little maybe over a year after my mom passed, he met Shirley, who would become his wife. And that got pretty serious pretty quickly. And it sort of became clear that that was where things were headed. And yeah, at that point, it sort of became real for me and I started to have a really tough time. I
Mm,
was 13, which is sort of an
mm,
inauspicious age for girls, even with their own biological mothers, and even under sort of typical circumstances, it's not
mhm.
an auspicious age for girls and authority figures.
Well, I have several questions on this just because I relate to it so much too. How quickly after your mom passed did he start dating?
I think it was about dating at all. I think about 4 months, which to me felt incredibly fast, but which I came to realize later. I mean, he had been without a romantic partner for a very long time. They had
Yeah.
the way they had managed to arrange things so that they could keep, running our family. And at one point they had a shared business, and my mother's health was to sort of say, okay, we're going to let the romantic piece of our relationship go. We're not going to try to fix that. We're just going to try to do a good job of these other things. And so and I sort of go into how I discovered that in the book, and it was all something I didn't quite understand at the time. But looking back, it seems clear that they had been, not husband and wife in that sense for a long time. And so for him, he'd been
Mm.
waiting a long time to feel
Yeah.
loved and to feel desired and to have those experiences. And so we were on such different clocks with our grieving process. He'd really, made peace with it a long time ago. And now part of me wants to say, oh my gosh, this poor man, like, let the man have some fun.
And I understand that, and you're a lot younger than me, but your ability to have that distance and have that compassion toward him is
Well,
admirable,
I
and
didn't have it
I
at the time, to be
I
clear.
know,
It's
no, I understand, and neither did I. In fact, I've just getting ready to put out my own memoir into the world, and a lot of it is about my relationship with my father after my mother died, because it is hard. And we had a woman named Dr. Patricia Papernow on here recently, and she's one of the foremost experts on step families in the world. And one of the things she said is it is particularly hard on young teenage girls, adolescents, to deal with step families, new parents, step parents. And then we're layering on the death of our mother. I mean, it's bad enough when there's a divorce,
Yeah.
that's hard, but losing your mother and then having this new mother, I think it's such a tough time for girls to deal with that. So
It is, and I think
I
it's a
get
really
it.
tough time for fathers too, and I don't know about in your case, but I think that some part of what led my father to move forward so quickly, he married they got together about a year after my mom passed, then they got engaged after about a year, and then they got married a year later. And I think something that was going on for him was this idea of like, well, I don't know how to parent a teenage girl. I better get another woman in here to tell me how to do it, which was not at all how I was, thinking about things. That wasn't, I think he thought, oh, surely another woman will have some intuitive sense of how to parent this teenage girl that I don't have. And I don't think that was, um, the right instinct, but I understand sort of the logic of it from his perspective, but I think it set us up for a really tricky dynamic.
And I think that that is common, especially with a father who wants to quickly bring in a mother. He's got young kids. My dad did the same thing, and he had 3 little kids, and he needed a mother to come back because he was busy with his business life and all of
Yes.
that, but
Yeah.
he just couldn't deal with it. So I
Yeah.
get
And
that.
and I'm there and I don't know about you, but kind of going like, no, what I need is you. You're the only parent I've got left.
Exactly, exactly. That's 100%. And this is where the tangled web of the step family situation comes in because it does get so complicated. And mostly people are trying to deal the best they can. And your dad, my dad, they thought they were doing the right thing. Us as teenage girls were like, no, I want you. Don't go away with this woman. I need you in my life. So, and then of course, for me, I'm learning so much more about being a stepmother, having this podcast,
Yeah.
because I only saw it, from my lens as a stepkid. And now I'm really seeing it from the lens also of these women coming into these marriages, these families, these relationships. It's really hard.
Yeah.
So I know that too. And well, I want to go back a little bit to your brother too and how he
Mhm.
handled all of it. And then I want to talk a little bit more about, what went on with you and your stepmother and your dad and like what happened during that early time.
Yeah. My brother we had really different experiences because he was enough older than me. He was 4 years older, but he'd also skipped a grade of school. So by the time our mother passed, I was almost 12. He was almost 16, but because he was a year ahead, he was already thinking about college. So,
Mm.
and leaving home. So he left home at 17. Um, and so for him, it was sort of, it mattered less to him in the immediate sense what the new organizational structure of our home would look like. He was already embarking on the project of individuating and becoming a person outside of our home. And so, while our mother's illness and death affected us both very deeply in different ways, this just sort of, I don't know, he just kind of skated past it in a way, I think is what he would say, was like, yeah, this was going on, but I didn't it didn't yeah, it just didn't affect him in the same way. Whereas I still had sort of all of high school in front of me, middle school and high school in front of me in this house, and it mattered very, very deeply to me, what was going on there. And
I think
yeah.
I was just gonna say, I do think too that there is, and I'm not an expert enough and haven't done the research enough to know exactly what it is, but from what I've seen, there is a little bit of a difference too with sons and their fathers and daughters and their fathers and their mothers and all of that. So
Yeah.
there's that going on as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was, yeah, figuring out, being a teenager. And then an added wrinkle was that the woman that my father ended up dating and marrying had a son who was my age and who I went to school with. And so we'd been in school together since the 3rd grade. And while theoretically I can imagine this being a great premise for like a family comedy where like the kids like don't like each other, but then they become friends, like I think this was a plot line in like the new Freaky Friday movie that came out recently. While theoretically you'd think, but the reality was sort of that we'd been going to school together long enough that if we were going to become friends, it would have happened already. And so for me, there was this added kind of sort of social nightmare of this boy who's in your class who you've never really gotten along with, and suddenly he's sleeping in the room next to you, which used to be my mom's room where she was during all of her treatments. And so you kind of couldn't come up with a more perfect kind of symbolic displacement of my memories and the family that I was still clinging on to, and it being kind of upended and replaced by this new thing that just made me so uncomfortable, and I had such a tough time.
I had the same thing. So it's again,
Yeah.
why I just loved your book so much. I get it.
You're like, "Is
I
this about
so
me? Did
get
I write this?"
it.
Yeah.
I know. I'm the older version of you. No, I can't believe it. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
No, yeah. So yeah, I think that was tricky. I It was obviously difficult for me to accept a new female authority figure at a time when you're as a teenager, you're trying to kind of individuate and find your own autonomy. I think there were two things that made it particularly tough. One was we had different as families, we had really different ideas about how to have hard conversations, about discipline. There were all of these family culture things that really were tough to integrate. I was not used to uh, having an adult be so volatile, so emotionally volatile and reactive. That was my perception of it. Was
Of your
that
stepmother?
yeah, and it was it
Okay.
was it was something that I had my parents had always tried hard, if not always succeeded, had tried hard to, if they lost their temper with me, it was something that they, regretted and wanted to repair, like they tried hard for like
Mm.
the kids were the ones with the big outrageous emotions and the parents are trying hard to like keep it together, and then their emotions get processed later together or with a therapist, or that was sort of how our very waspy, possibly repressed Anglo English, Anglo-Saxon family operated itself. And then this person comes in with such a different idea about conflict, that it's okay, that screaming and yelling and running around and that this is all okay. This is a healthy part of how of family conflict. And I was just so um anathema to my sensibilities that I really struggled. I really struggled with that. And then the other thing was that it seemed to me, this was my perception, and I'll never she knows the truth of it much better than I do, of course, but my perception was that mentioning my mom and talking about our life before seemed to upset her.
Mm.
And so the messaging that I received one way or another was that to talk about my mom too much or our lives before or things that had gone on um, was upsetting to the adults in the house. And so it didn't feel safe or okay to bring her up a lot or to talk about those memories. And that was really hard, especially because the house had been such a next. I associated the house so deeply with her. She'd poured so much of herself into the home, and we so many, our memories were centered there. So what happened was that I was so lucky to have this whole community of people who were happy to talk about her with me, but it meant that happened outside the house. That was
Mm.
something for outside, and inside the house it felt as though it was, yeah, not really safe or okay to reminisce in that way, and that felt strange and sad.
Well, how did your dad handle it? Did he always sort of side with your stepmother? And so that made you feel even more?
I
isolated,
think
or
he
did he
was
help you?
I think he was pretty confused. I think he was confused about what to do for the best. He was quite a passive person by nature, and he had these 2 kind of opinionated women that he was living with, and I think he often felt stuck between us and didn't know what was the best thing to do. My perception, of course, was that he tended to side with his wife, but that may just be my perception. Um, I think he again, because she was, could be quite volatile, I think that it was I do think that there was an impulse to kind of appease that and to try to he was an avoidant, conflict avoidant, and so I think that that's sort of how things tended to go. But yeah, I would say, not that I've never been a step parent, and I certainly would not pretend to know how to go about it. But if I did have one piece of advice just from my own experience, it would be that I do think, whether it's divorce or death, I do think that the missing parent needs to remain mentionable. Or I think that that is really in the best interest of the child or the children, is that they need to be able to talk about this person who's not there, to feel a sense of integration of their selves, right? That they don't have to compartmentalize away that person that they're missing.
I was going to say the same thing, so I'm glad you said it because, for anyone listening, I think it's really important to have this conversation because I do think that sometimes a step parent can feel threatened by which I never understood. The person's not here anymore. It's not a
They're
divorce.
not coming
Where
back.
why are they
Yeah.
being yeah, why are they threatened by somebody who is, not coming back? That's right. But I've come to learn that they're threatened by this image that is forever there, of this person who's become maybe saintly or whatever, and they cannot live up to that. Or
Yeah.
I think it's a lot more complex than it seems on the surface. But I think I do give my stepmothers credit. They were good about, integrating my grandparents. My mother was an only child, and it was just devastating, and so my grandparents,
Mm.
were always included, and they weren't always the easiest at times, and that for all of my own problems with my stepmothers, I give them credit for that, and I think it's really important to remember that kids are hurting so much and that it's not a threat to you as a stepmother or stepfather it's actually going to bring you closer to that step kid because they'll respect you more, and if you help them feel this integration like you're saying, it will help your relationship much more than you realize, and that will help your relationship with your spouse too, um, because I think they'll appreciate that. So, anyway, I think we both really agree on that one important piece of advice.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And of course, yeah, folks are using the tools that they have at the time, and yeah, it is hard. It is a hard puzzle.
It is a hard puzzle. So what happened with your father? And yeah, and then I would like to know if you have a relationship anymore with your stepmother.
Yeah, so we muddled through my high school years, and I then, when it came time for me to go to college, as we've talked about, I really struggled then with the transition, because between the loss of my mom and this feeling of alienation from my home, I had fully invested myself in my broader community. I was incredibly close to my high school friends. I was very involved in my high school, my community, my town. Like, I just really felt connected to this place. And I was so devastated that that was all about to change, that all of my friends would leave, I would leave. It was so hard. And I think I was sort of on autopilot and in denial for a while I applied to Tufts, went to Tufts, and then sort of halfway across the country in a plane, I was like, what have I done? I don't know actually why I'm doing this, or who I am, or where I need a reset. So I ended up taking a year off and living in the house with my father and stepmother, which was really tricky, but I just didn't know what else to do, where to be to kind of get my feet back under me. But I did. That's where I always was a theater kid, and I that year I just did a ton of theater, and I realized I really did, want to become a professional actor, and that was my path. And decided to go to UC Berkeley, which is much closer to home. It was like, a
Yeah.
little over an hour door to door. And that was my kind of transition. And so I was feeling by my junior year of college at Berkeley, I was feeling really solid again. I'd sort of come out of my depression, and with the help of some of medication, which was just a huge game changer for me. And I had, you know, found my community at school, and I was, you know, uh, I don't know. I just really felt like I'd found myself again and found my place in the world. And then the second semester of my junior year, just a few weeks after Christmas, my father took his life. And I felt, you know, very upended once again in terms of um, just trying to, yeah, that stability, that thing of where is home? Where am I from? Where is my anchor? Because from the time, I would say from the moment that my father took his life, that house, which was such a huge, important, safe place for me, even when things got complicated, was no longer home. Once he wasn't in it, it wasn't home anymore. It became my stepmother's house, and it became legally her house. She inherited it, and I just felt that I would have to find my safe places elsewhere.
Hmm. Boy, you went through a lot. That's,
Well, what I was incredibly lucky was to have
yeah,
this wonderful relationship with my older brother, and I know you've talked on this
good.
podcast a lot about the importance of sibling
Yeah.
relationships and how incredibly just life saving they can be. Of course, not every sibling relationship works that way. Often, sometimes the same traumatic event will cause siblings to really fracture because you just can't. You're not processing it in the same way, and that just happens. We were lucky in that these events really, really cemented our connection. My brother is incredibly important to me. I was just at his house in North Carolina last weekend to celebrate his birthday,
Mm.
and he became my safe place. So he had unexpectedly become a father of twins with his college girlfriend, and they were making their home in North Carolina. And they became my home. I spent all my holidays with them, and I got to watch their kids grow up and be involved in their lives. And that was just this incredible, unexpected gift that I had this place to land after my original family kind of splintered.
That is, that I don't know, the old dumb cliche of home is where the heart is actually really true,
Yeah,
and I think once your father was gone, did your stepmother stay in the house then
she
for a period of
did.
time?
And she still owns it. Yeah. And
Okay.
again, people grieve so differently. So for her,
Mhm.
it seems to have been comforting to stay there. For me, it would have been very difficult, and I do find it difficult to visit. I think it's just a place that now, it's the site of so much sadness and so much
Mhm.
loss. So yeah, for me, it stopped feeling like home.
I do think, your sibling, if you're fortunate to have wonderful siblings, which I also have a wonderful brother and sister, and when I am with them in their homes, I feel the same way. I've made my own home. I have my own family, and that's even more important is you're married now, and you've got your life, and you're making your own home for yourself. So, um all of that is important. Just a place to go where you still feel the love and you with your brother, you feel your parents' love still through each
Absolutely.
other, and I'm sure it's the same for
Absolutely.
him. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And we talk about them all the time and it's in a loving, joyful way. It doesn't feel it doesn't feel sad to talk about them. It feels wonderful and necessary and important, it's
Important.
that they're still, and through us, his kids, will know them. They knew their grandfather very briefly. He passed when they were about 3, my brother's twins. But we tell them stories, and they will know them through us, and that is so joyful. Yeah.
And it's also joyful, I find, when, your parents' friends who knew your parents will
Yes.
tell you a story about them, and brings them back to life. So that's another
Absolutely.
thing
That's where the
that I
title of my book comes from, is that is
oh,
that that very thing, really. Well, it's from a lot of places, but yeah, is that, like, that when someone who knew my parents maybe even longer than I did will say, "Did I ever tell you, about the time,"
oh.
and I could, that's like, "Tell me." They say it's my 5 favorite words. "Did I ever tell you?" Because suddenly it's like you have a new memory of them, that you weren't really there for, but you get to keep it, as you get to keep it and integrate it into your understanding of them. And it's so wonderful.
And it means so much. I've discussed this with some of my friends who've lost parents young. It means so much. So again, anybody who's listening, do that for somebody who lost their parent young if you're a friend of theirs. Tell them a story, tell them something you remember if you're a relative. I think it makes that person's world just so happy to hear that.
I
Well, you
agree.
have an amazing, resilient perspective, and I guess we're coming to the end here, but you've shared a lot of wisdom. And one of the things I'd like to ask you is, how have you gotten to this place? I mean, you went through a lot of tragedy and trauma. How at this point, because you're still pretty young, like, do you have this ability to have so much perspective with it now?
A lot of therapy. Um, no, really, I had the great good fortune of being put into therapy when I was 6 years old. My mom especially had this sense, she understood that what our family was going through was really hard and was going to leave a mark on my brother and I that might or might not be visible as it was being made. You might not see what it was doing or how we were reacting to it. But yeah, so she took me to a child psychologist that I saw off and on my entire childhood. And she helped me through my mom's death. She helped me through my father's remarriage. She helped me through my father's death. And she just had this whole she had my whole story, and she knew my whole journey, and so she was invaluable. She actually passed away a few years ago, and I hadn't been a patient of hers in a while, but I had this irrational thought but even before I, thought to have empathy and sadness for her family and for, the loss of her life. I had this totally selfish, like, immediate thought of, like, oh my God, it's all loose. Like, she's been holding this for me for years, and now
Mm,
it's
mm.
so such a funny thought but I really did see her that way, that she was holding this with me or for me. Um, so I can't recommend it enough if you can afford it and if you can find a great child's therapist or family therapist. I mean, it really, really helped me the whole way through. And I still I go to therapy, from time to time, and it's just been a big part of my life, and I'm a huge, huge advocate for it. Um, yeah, and then I guess the other thing that's sort of odd, you asked me if I still have a relationship with my stepmother, and what I was thinking was that, again, people grieve in different ways, and for some people, I think it can feel like staying connected to the people. Like, for her, there was a time, I think, where she felt like staying connected to me or my brother was like having a connection with my dad. I would guess that felt good for her. Um, but for me, it felt like the versions of ourselves that we'd and our family that we'd played out in that house, like sort of like a play, right? You had this one cast of characters that's like slowly getting replaced. And it was sort of like we'd played this story out and it was time, for something fresh. And everyone, tried so hard, but we we struggled to make it work, I think, as a blended family. I have an anecdote in my book that I think about a lot, which was that it was about a year after my father had died and my stepmother had started dating someone else, and she wanted to take me the 2 of them wanted to take me out to dinner for my birthday. And so they came to pick me up in Berkeley, and they came in my father's car, which was sort of the same car, or the version of the same car that I'd been driving around in my entire life. And I got into the back seat, and I suddenly had this like imagery crashing over me of like I'm in the back of this car with my both my parents, and then I'm in the back of the car with just my dad, and then I'm in the back of the car with my dad and my stepmother, and then just my stepmother, and now it's my stepmother and some random guy that I've just met. And I was like, I can't, like, I just had this feeling of like, how am I still in the same car? As like as the front seat gets slowly recast over and over, and I think for me that was
Wow.
a moment of like, I wish everyone well, but I need to, there are certain things or threads that I feel good to let go.
Mhm. And, that's sometimes you have to let go. And the other message I think is also don't do life alone. Like, the therapy talking
Oh
about
yeah.
things, but being able to have the strength, I think, to be able to say, I can't hang on to this. It's just something I've had to learn too, when to let go. So, you have so many good messages that you've shared here today, and I
Oh,
really
thanks. I've thought a lot
appreciate
about
it.
these things. So
I know.
I'm always delighted to talk about them because yeah, I've spent a lot of time thinking about how we do this thing called life together with other people who are genuinely other people, right?
Right,
How
right.
we help each other and how we give each other grace and how we take care of ourselves. And yeah, there's so much here. And I'm so glad that you're devoting a podcast to this. I think it's so fascinating and is so helpful.
Thank you. Well, and it let's bring it back to the present. Is there anything you're excited about? I mean, you're a playwright, you're a writer, anything coming up that you're excited about, that you're working on?
Yeah. I'm having a wonderful process right now at NYU with some of the students, the undergrads at Tisch. They're rehearsing and performing a play of mine called Anna
Oh,
Karenina.
wow.
It's called Anna Karenina, a riff, and that's been so much fun. We're doing it as a
Cool.
class there, and then I've got another play that is having a little. Um, Kind of reading development process up in Ithaca at Civic Ensemble that I'm in working on rewrites for now. So yeah, very much enjoying being in the theater space. Again, it's just rehearsal is like my favorite environment. And then I am trying, emphasis on trying to write a second book, but fiction this time. And so all I can say is wish me luck.
I wish you so much luck. You deserve all the luck in the world. And you're such a creative, talented person. You're a beautiful writer. And again, I'm going to throw this up here one more time because I cannot recommend this book enough. So please read it. Did I ever tell you, Genevieve Kingston? And thank you so much for being here today. It means a lot to me, as you can tell. I
Thank you,
really appreciate
Robin.
it.
Oh, I
Yeah.
was thrilled that you asked. Anytime.
Okay, great. Well, I might ask you again. You never know. Maybe when you've got your new book finished and you want to
Mhm.
come promote it, that would be
Sounds great.
great. So,
Yeah,
okay.
knock on
All
wood.
right. Knock on wood. All right. Me too. Take care.
You too.
Bye.